Dateline, Los Angeles, September 2016. Quote, also, this whole thing is super weird and crazy. It's certainly possible that someone who knew Capote bought the ashes, but the idea that some anonymous stranger owns the remains of a famous person and paid a substantial amount of money for them is, once again, super weird and crazy. Do you put them on display? Do you travel the world and carry them with you? Do you do some third thing that we don't even want to think of because it's too upsetting? These Capote ashes were actually a part of the guy, so even a joke about doing something funny with them seems a little crass. That was the report written for the AV Club about the auction of author Truman Capote's ashes. Yes, ashes. And ignoring the fact that the writer of the article makes a joke about doing something funny with the ashes and then immediately chastises people for making a joke about doing something funny with the ashes. That was just a snapshot of the journalistic sentiment which seemed to be hovering over the entire auction. Some backstory. On August 25th, 1984, after a roller coaster ride of declining health and Oscar Wilde squared shenanigans, Truman Capote, author of In Cold Blood, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and more, passed away in the Bel Air home of Joanne Carson, the ex-wife of Johnny Carson. I know, it's kind of a sentence you can only say about a time in which Hollywood Squares was still on the air. Fast forward to May 8th, 2015, when Joanne Carson herself passed away after a run of declining health. Much of Carson's estate went to the auction house Julian's, including many of Capote's belongings which had been left in her house, and, of course, half of his ashes in a small wooden box. Half, of course, because the story was that the ashes had been split between Joanne Carson and Capote's partner, Jack Dunphy. Dunphy claims that he received the totality of the ashes and spread them all. But as is the case with Liberty Valance, Truman Capote, and Hollywood, when the legend becomes fact, print the legend. And so, the small box containing half of Truman Capote's ashes went up on the auction block with a starting bid of $2,000 and an estimate of $4,000 to $6,000. The media circus began. Articles from The Guardian to CNN to Vanity Fair started popping up. And while many of them took the stance of curious passersby, an odd narrative began to form in the pieces. The headline for the Vanity Fair article was, "The man auctioning off Truman Capote's ashes explains himself." Town and Country discussed the ethics of selling human remains. The tone of the articles started becoming, if not passive-aggressive, outright preachy. Journalists, normally unwilling to take a moral stand when it comes to important things like police shootings and presidential elections, finally found a comfortable circus freak with which they could get everyone on board. The articles and the comments below began to take on a patina of righteousness and, even worse, moral rigidity. You know, the same sort of moral rigidity which leads to fun things like racism, bullying, and witch trials. I especially took much of this to heart. At the time of the publishing of the Atlantic's article on the auction, I was the high bidder for Truman Capote's ashes. Many of my friends were very supportive. Some of them a little too much. And many of them started spouting the same lines of moral rigidity and universal morality. To me personally, the question of morality hadn't really come up. For several reasons, of course. The selling of human remains is not new, even in modern society. Many of them are for scientific reasons, of course, but yet again, this is an area where American society tends to give a little more social and cultural leeway to the math and sciences than it's willing to give to the arts. The idea of having a skeleton in medical classrooms so students can see what a real skeleton looks like, even though the ability to create a fake is definitely possible, takes a sort of social and cultural priority over a gay writer from Texas with an addictive personality wanting to feel closer to another gay writer from Texas with an addictive personality. The concrete tops the ephemeral in modern American society, and we have nothing but the Vanderbilts to blame. Okay. I was hoping everybody would get pitchforks out and we would go to the Vanderbilts, but no, that's on me. In a modern society where the phrase friends or the family you choose is bandied about like an October cold bug, we seem to stop at the point where it gets a little too spooky-ooky. We all know people who have the ashes of family members in their homes, I, myself, have my childhood dog's collar and ashes in my apartment. Are we all Victorian Gothic monsters set upon the pure and simple morals of this burgeoning metropolis, tearing at the silken garter of its chastity? Immorality, what is wrong, is simply what's just on the other side of the line. Sure, there are some aspects of morality that we've all agreed on as a society. Stealing is wrong. Well, unless you and your family are starving and you're stealing food in order to feed yourselves, or, if you're stealing back what's rightfully yours, or for some people, it's okay if you're stealing oil from another country. So, okay, fine. But murder is definitely wrong. Well, for some, if you're killing someone in self-defense, it's okay, or for some, it's okay if you're killing someone because they've committed a crime worthy of it, or for some, it's okay if you're helping a person in pain go quietly and in peace. For a lot of us, the definition of murder isn't even agreed upon. Jewish people think a sky man creating the world is solid, but having a son who comes back to life is a bit far. Evangelicals are fine with the son thing, but the idea of worshiping his mother is way too much. Catholics are down with the mom, but if you move the whole thing to Jackson County, Missouri, then everyone's upset. But we can all agree that Jehovah's Witnesses are weird. The auction for Truman Capote's ashes happened over the period of a few days and ended while I was on vacation. Since it's me, I was obviously on a vacation through Virginia to visit important sites of the American Enlightenment and Revolution. Like you do. I received my outbid notice while standing on the lawn of Mount Vernon, the home of George Washington. The bidding had reached $10,000 and was going way too far for me to pretend like I could even keep up with the bidding. So I sighed, put my phone back in my pocket, and continued on my walk down to the crypt of George and Martha Washington. As I passed the sign saying, "Please be quiet out of respect for those interred here," I watched a child run around one of the obelisks in front of the tomb as if it were a maypole. Another family was posing in front of the open doors of the crypt, smiling wide as their father took their picture in front of the caskets of the first president and first lady of the United States of America. A Danish couple was arguing about where to get lunch just to their left, and next to them, a teenager had his head buried in a game on his phone. Our society has a weird way of dealing with death. We like to pretend that it's this austere thing that we both respect and fear. When a person dies, you shouldn't speak ill of them, but if it's the former Princess of Wales, you better get as many cameras there as possible. We must respect and mourn the dead until enough time passes and then you can catch Pokemon on the plaque listing their accomplishments. You should only own the ashes of the people who had a personal effect on your life, because the concept of humanity and what affects and changes and grows and evolves a person's soul is so concrete and scientific that we can legislate it in the cultural zeitgeist. We have a celebrity culture where you can, right now, tweet at most of your favorite authors, actors, writers, chefs, presidents. You can be part of their lives, feel like you know them. YouTube culture is entirely built off of the concept of give and take of modern internet celebrity. You can be their friend. You can Snapchat them. You can talk to them after their shows. You can add them on Facebook. They can inspire you to greatness, but don't go too far. Mind the line. Truman Capote's ashes ended up going for almost $45,000. There are pages and pages of Google results for his ashes. Even without my personal involvement, I saw articles popping up all over the place about the auction. Anyone who knows anything about Truman Capote, a man whose dying wishes were to have one more book, a giant party, and one more shot at the talk show circuit, can only imagine how he would have been overjoyed that the mere concept of an auction of his ashes 30 years after his death would have stirred up so much media coverage. Truman Capote was a writer, a man, a character who danced through society and culture. Before this auction, or before this show tonight, when was the last time you really thought about Truman Capote? Honestly. It may be morbid, it may be macabre, but isn't that what we all want in one way or another? To be remembered, to be wanted, to be thought about, to be considered. On different scales and levels of intimacy, of course, but the universality of this story is not the morality of it, but the humanity. Truman had said to Joanne Carson that he didn't want his ashes to sit on the shelf. And the winner of the auction, who remained anonymous, promised that they would fulfill that wish. So Truman Capote gets to go on the adventures denied to him by his young death. There's a sort of beauty in that. A life after death, both physically in his ensuing journeys ahead and spiritually in the very thoughts and words in this room right now. I will always remember the impact that Truman Capote had on my life, especially as I look down at his cufflinks that I totally won in that same auction.